Mark your calendars, everybody. This Friday, Kamala Harris is going to join Bill Clinton as part of a Clinton Global Initiative event to discuss the impact of COVID on women specifically, as well as women's empowerment around the world.
Really interesting. So the event, it features Stacey Abrams, Hillary Clinton, Chelsea Clinton, more special guests, editor-in-chief at The Real News and host of the Working People podcast, Max Alvarez, and co-host of the Realignment podcast, Marshall Kossoff. They join us now. Marshall, let me start with you. I think, well, obviously around the general ironies around Kamala Harris talking with Women's Empowerment Initiative with Bill Clinton. But I think what strikes me more is about how much of a return it is really to like 2014 era consensus politics, which I wouldn't say it ignores a lot of the conventional changes in the way that we've thought and reckoned with Bill Clinton's legacy since then. So what do you think about it in that perspective?
Yeah, the part that's hard here, and this is probably the thing which is difficult on an interpersonal level, is I don't think anyone thinks about Bill Clinton anymore. Like, there's obviously like a super online audience of people who are going to bring up the Jeffrey Epstein thing. Right. I could definitely see people in the comments angrily attacking me already. But there's actually something there. People don't really think of him. And this is always going to be the difficult issue. And this was always when 2014, 2015, people thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be president. There really was this big question in politics of how are we going to reckon with Bill Clinton's legacy? How is he going to be around the White House? How restrained is he going to be? And this just shows that he's just so frankly out of the narrative that it hasn't been a problem.
That's so weird.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, Max, actually, to that point, in the book Lucky, they report that he almost got left out of the DNC entirely. He was given like a 5-minute slot, which, you know, Bill Clinton famously would go on for hours and hours in his convention speeches. He barely made the cut to even be included this time around. So it is interesting from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like, it's one of those things where it's just like it seems incredibly obvious that you should keep this guy away from the convention. And the mere fact that he wasn't kind of completely iced out, you know, is still concerning, but I'm glad at least that they recognize just how kind of toxic he and his legacy are. You know, like Marshall said, yeah, like the ironies here are tremendously obvious, right? I mean, you have a guy who everyone knows has multiple sexual assault and harassment charges against him. You have a guy who was literally pictured with one of Epstein's people, but also, like, you know, the thing that I wanted to kind of stress, you know, understanding first of all that, you know, like, I'm a dude, this is a 3-dude kind of panel here, you know, so I want to be careful, but like, you know, I think one thing that a lot of scholars and activists have pointed out over the years, right, is that it's not just about who Bill Clinton is as a person, right, which objectively he seems to be a very terrible person, right, but on top of that, his policies, right, have done so much damage to poor and working class women and poor and working class people in general, right? I mean, people seem to forget that it wasn't Republicans who truly kind of put the nail in the coffin of the past welfare state. It was Bill Clinton, and he was very proud of it, right? He was very proud to kind of take this axe to the social safety net upon which many poor and working class women depended. And you combine that with things like the crime bill, you combine that with like his neoliberal free trade policies that created the sorts of conditions that have led to mass violence against women, particularly along the border in Mexico, in places like Ciudad Juarez. So like this is like, what is this? Why are we doing this? It is nothing more than just the vain attempt of villainous people to preserve their legacy, you know, and make sure it's clean in the future.
What do you think, Marshall? I mean, obviously, it was complicated, you know, and all there with Bill Clinton. But I guess the real question is that Clinton is very much and has always been a very jealous guard of his legacy. He sees that party has moved past him in many different ways. The CGI event very much, because I don't even think they had very much high-profile events under the Trump era. Is this kind of a reinsertion of Bill Clinton, trying to bring Clinton back? Like, what exactly should we read into this?
Yeah, we should definitely read into the fact that this is about legacy securing. And look, the thing that's interesting about what you're saying, Max, and I totally get the policy case that you're making, but this is the difficult thing for the Democratic Party to think about, which is that Bill Clinton's presidency was incredibly popular. Separate from the policy implications, he was the first Democrat to be reelected handily in more than 30 years. And once again, it'd be easier for us to talk about the toxic policy legacy of Bill Clinton if Joe Biden wasn't pretty resoundingly elected in the primary and then winning the presidency. And in many ways, Joe Biden really pushed through defending large parts of that Clintonian legacy, whether it was the crime bill, whether it was the decisions around debt and deficit spending at the time, that the whole idea that hypothetically you could work together with Republicans well. So there's just really this difficult position for people. I think it would be much easier for Democrats if this were a Jimmy Carter situation where people interpersonally like him. No one dislikes Jimmy Carter. He's genuinely a really great person, but his policy and political legacy was obviously just doomed and no one wants to bring it up again. So it seems like you have a totally inverse Jimmy Carter situation.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Max, let me also ask you about Kamala Harris. First of all, her policy record with regard to women and girls, also nothing to write home about. But second of all, what do you think of how she has been utilized during the Biden administration? She hasn't been as visible and out front as I actually expected her to be. Reportedly, she hasn't been given a specific portfolio, but they go out of their way. Joe especially goes out of his way to say, oh, she's the last person in the room, and she's my closest advisor. We make sure to read her in on absolutely everything. What do you make of those dynamics?
So it's hard for me to give an objective analysis because I've been rewatching Veep on HBO. So, it's hard not to see everything through that lens. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Crystal. Like I was kind of really expecting them to trot, Kamala Harris out even more than they have already. If nothing else, for kind of branding purposes, right? Which is, a lot of the function that the vice presidency kind of serves. And when you have a historic figure like Kamala Harris, you might as well try to get as much use out of her occupying that position as you can. So, I think that it's hard to figure out what exactly to make of this. We were talking last time that I was on the show, right, about how Republicans have up till now had a relatively hard time pinning down Joe Biden, in the way that they were able to with Clinton and Obama. Perhaps that's actually part of their strategy, is to just kind of stay a little quiet, let people kind of get a little more confidence as the vaccines roll out or stuff like that. Just kind of better seen, not heard sort of policy.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty smart politically. Okay, guys, we're going to be back with Team Rising right after this.